Hello, the title of this session is Impact of RiboCeine Technology. My name is John Hobbs and I'm a Silver Associate with Max International. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the RiboCeine technology, at least at a very high level. The science behind RiboCeine is solid. It raises glutathione in the organs of the body up to 300% more effectively than the next best approach. And there's an independent peer-reviewed and published study that proved that. Now, please note, we must always say up to 300%. We must never say over 3% and 300%. We must never say specifically 300%. Now, the reason is this. In that study, the percent increases varied somewhat from body organ to body organ. Now, the RiboCeine science is solid. We don't need to damage our credibility by overstating. Now, officially, we say there are 74 diseases and conditions associated with low glutathione. Well, I've personally identified in excess of 100. For medically trained professionals like doctors, nurses, and pharmacists, there's a website that explains the science in somewhat technical terms. The chemical formula for RiboCeine is D-ribose L-cysteine, the sugar molecule ribose, chemically bonded with the amino acid cysteine. So it makes sense that the web address for this site is riboceine.com. So let's take a look at that site and see what we can discover. And I'm going to share something different. And here we are at that website. We've got the riboceine.com website. And the first tab, there are 7 internal tabs. The first one is the importance of glutathione. And it talks about what glutathione is very basically and talks about some of the benefits of having glutathione in the body. And most doctors know that, so it doesn't go into a lot of detail. The second tab talks about the problems associated with aging. Senescence means aging. And there's very little here other than a high-level description, but it's the essence of it is outlined in this diagram. From birth through to old age, the level of glutathione in the body diminishes as we age. Now, correspondingly, the level of oxidative stress increases as we age. And oxidative stress is associated with all kinds of health issues. And specifically, I think it's fair to say that every chronic disease, specifically every age-related chronic disease, is associated with oxidative stress. The next tab is endogenous glutathione support. Well, endogenous glutathione simply means, endogenous means that it is produced in the body itself. You can't make use of any glutathione that happens to be in some of the food you eat. It just doesn't do any good. It won't survive the digestive process. So glutathione is endogenous. And the support says, help we can give it to increase its levels through supplementation. And the most common solution for glutathione supplementation historically has been N-acetylcysteine, otherwise known as NAC. And this talks about that. And then it identifies some shortcomings or problems associated with NAC. And the doctors know about NAC. They may not be aware of 1 or 2 of the shortcomings. So we've got that covered here. The next tab is RiboCeine, Advanced Endogenous Glutathione Support. Well, I think they're calling it advanced because RiboCeine is more effective at raising glutathione than NAC. And we can say that fairly confidently as a result of a study that was done. And here's the essence. Comparing the effectiveness of RiboCeine against the effectiveness of N-acetylcysteine, and it's clearly superior. And in fact, 300% more effective. And this is where the 300% came from. It came from this study. And this particular reading was from the liver cells. In fact, the hepatocytes, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But anyway, the liver cells where we got that from. And again, this was a peer-reviewed and published study. So that's where that comes from. So essentially, it's informing the doctors that, hey, this RiboCeine thing is important because it does a much better job than the one you're probably familiar with. The next tab is called Mechanism of Action. And this one is key. This talks about how RiboCeine works. And doctors just love this. When they get to this tab, they're just blown away. For the rest of us, unless you've got an organic chemistry background, your eyes are going to glaze over. But essentially what it does is it describes how we take a ribosine molecule or a ribosine compound and how it gets transformed inside the cell into separate cysteine and D-ribose molecules that the cell can use to support ATP production and support glutathione production. So this is the key thing. And in fact, this is a high-level view of the patent for RiboCeine. And if you want to see the patent, you click on that link and it will take you to all the nitty-gritty details around the patent. The next internal tab is called Research. And this lists all of the independent, not funded by the company, independent, peer-reviewed and published studies on RiboCeine. And currently there are 44 studies at this point in time, but there are more coming, and as they get published, they will be added to the list and this number will rise. The last tab is entitled Safety and Usage, and what it has in it is a glutathione fact sheet and then a product sheet for each of the Max products that has RiboCeine in it. So this is the ribocysteine.com website, and it's terribly valuable. Now, let's go back to research. Today, I want to look at the practical implications of one of the RiboCeine published studies. In the research section, the studies are listed in sequence by date of publication. And specifically, I want to look at a study published in 2015. So let me see if I can find it. Here we are. 2015, published in the American Journal of Surgery, D-ribose L-cysteine supplementation enhances wound healing in a rodent model. Now, if you click on that link, it will take you to the actual publication itself, as found in PubMed.gov. And what you've got is an abstract that identifies the background to the study, what methods were used in the study, what results were found, and then the conclusions. And the conclusion reads something like this. DRLC, that's D-ribose L-cysteine, also known as RiboCeine, DRLC supplementation appears to reduce wound inflammation early after wounding and enhance wound strength by 14 days. Now, if you look at the body of the study, the abstract conclusions, in my opinion, are far too brief. The implications of the details might go something like this. If I have elevated glutathione levels from RiboCeine supplementation before, during, and after receiving a wound, the wound will likely heal faster, be stronger, and have less scarring than might be experienced by someone with no RiboCeine supplementation and who therefore has lower glutathione levels. So let me stop sharing for a moment and say, well, okay, some of you may be asking, well, that's nice, but that was a study involving rats. What are the implications for a human? And there's a reason researchers use genetically identical rats for this kind of research. There's a strong correlation between what happens with lab rats and what will be experienced by humans. Now, what I want to show you is a human experience of this finding. Now, did anyone notice the scar on my forehead? No? No, that's okay. In the early summer of 2021, during a lull in the pandemic, I was sitting on the deck at a friend's house. He was having a small outdoor dinner party, but only involving people who were vaccinated. Now, my friend also happens to be one of my Max customers. Now, he mentioned what I was doing these days to one of the other guests, someone who I did not know before. And he then went on to say that one of our products had helped him. But the man and his wife looked somewhat skeptical. Well, I turned to them. I pointed to my forehead, and I reminded them that I was in my 70s and asked them to guess how long ago the injury took place that caused the scar. Well, they took a close look. They discussed the issue among themselves, and they agreed that it must have been at least 5 or 10 years ago. And they were shocked when I told them it happened only 9 months prior. So let's see if we can manage to go back to our presentation. I want this, share. I want it to be full screen. Oh, screen sharing is paused. Let me try that again. Screen share. Share that. There we are in full screen mode. Okay. So it was Friday, October 23rd, 2020, about 5 in the afternoon, actually a few minutes after. I was walking with my daughter across a parking lot toward a grocery store. I went to step up onto the walk in front of the store, but I didn't raise my foot quite high enough. My toe caught on the curb and I tripped. My forward motion meant that my center of mass was well in front of my feet, so I was about to fall on my face. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, there was a concrete pillar just in front of me, so I put my hands out to the pillar to break my fall. Well, that worked. Unfortunately, my head maintained its forward momentum and came in resounding contact with the corner of the pillar. Well, I put my hand up to the point of impact on my forehead and it came away quite bloody. Well, I tried to use a few facial tissues to staunch the flow, but no avail. Head wounds tend to bleed heavily as a matter of course. And add to that the blood thinner I was taking, things got messy fairly quickly. My daughter asked a store staff person for some paper towels to use as a pressure bandage. Now, fortunately, in her younger years, she was a lifeguard and had extensive training in rescue and first aid. And when I asked if we just put a Band-Aid on it, get on with things, she told me no, the cut was too deep. Now, what she told me the next day was that she could see the skull bone, but she didn't want to upset me, so kept quiet at the time. She asked the same helpful staff person to get a chair for me to sit on, and then she proceeded to call emergency services and ask for a paramedic unit to attend. Now, when they arrived, the first thing they did was put on their COVID protective equipment and then examine me. See the yellow protective covering and blue gloves on the paramedic at the right? Well, apparently standard protocol for someone over 65 with a head injury is immediately to apply a neck brace. Well, I'm over 70. They applied a pressure bandage. But because of the position of the wound on my forehead, they had to wrap my head to hold the pressure bandage in place. Then off to emergency room at a local hospital. Now, I'm not going to go into all that happened during the 6 hours at the hospital. I will tell you that COVID protocols mean that everything takes longer. The doctor who treated me had to apply 4 dissolving stitches deep in the wound and 8 regular stitches on the surface. She told me that due to gravity, some of the excess blood in the wound area would drift down my face. I was to go to my regular doctor to get the stitches removed in 7 days. Well, a nurse later applied some antiseptic ointment and a bandage over the wound, and they sent me on my way about midnight. Well, I recalled the wound healing study, peer-reviewed and published in 2015, that demonstrated several benefits for wound healing by elevating glutathione levels. Now, because of my age, I was already taking multiple doses of glutathione accelerators. So as soon as I got home, I started a program of increasing the amounts by over 50%, with the intent of continuing that for at least a couple of weeks. I decided to leave everything alone for a day. Now, on the second day after the injury, I took off the bandage so that I could have a shower, clean the wound, apply some antiseptic ointment, and put on another clean bandage. So about 36 hours after leaving the hospital, there was dried blood in my hair. And recalling the doctor's warning about blood drifting down my face, I can now positively confirm that my eye is part of my face. Boy, is that ugly. Now, given my age, I expected that I'd have a very nasty zipper scar on my forehead where that stitching was done. But the reports in the wound healing study gave me some hope for a better outcome. Well, I managed to get an appointment with my doctor to have the surface stitches removed a week after the injury. Now, most of the blood around my eye had dissipated. The wound itself was looking better than I expected, but I still anticipated evidence of the stitching job would be quite visible. Now, 2 weeks after that, a week after that, 2 weeks after the injury, clearly the wound healing study has been validated by this human. The scar will always be there, but it looks like what I might expect if I was a 12-year-old and had a similar injury, but I'm in my early 70s. Now, the range of benefits delivered by elevated glutathione levels continues to impress. As noted earlier, for the 2-week period following the injury, I increased my intake of glutathione accelerators by about 50%, actually more than that. Then I reverted to pre-injury levels. However, you need to note that my usual level is over 3 times standard doses. Now, this is due to my age, early 70s. Natural glutathione production drops as we age. Most people in their 30s and 40s need some level of supplementation. Those over 60 need even more. When glutathione levels are raised in the body, a wide variety of the body's systems are impacted. Some of these improvements may happen within minutes, others over several hours, others over days or weeks. Whenever I recommend a glutathione accelerator, I ask the person to undertake a self-evaluation exercise to track the improvements they notice over time. 10 criteria, self-evaluation, baseline assessment before they start, and then a fresh evaluation every week over a 12-week period. Now, what we've observed is that for middle-aged people, those in their 40s and 50s, who have no significant health challenges, over 90% of them, that's 90%, recorded noticeable benefits within 3 months, 90 days. People with health challenges tend to notice improvements sooner. So I thought it would be useful to track the progress of my healing over time as well. Now, here's the final photo taken 6 months after the injury. Over time, the visible width of the scar seemed to diminish, but only a little bit and very slowly. Now, the scar will never disappear, but given the original condition of the wound, I'm both surprised and pleased with the impact that elevated glutathione levels had on the wound. Now, we're not permitted to claim that any of our supplements can diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any disease. The reason I was able to be so explicit with this situation is that this was an injury, and an injury is not a disease. The point is that RiboCeine technology increases glutathione in the body. Now, that was verified by several independent peer-reviewed and published studies. It was also confirmed by Health Canada when it issued its license for Max 1, which contains only pure RiboCeine. Bottom line, when glutathione levels are increased, good things tend to happen. And there's evidence to back that up.